then, welcome to the latest edition of the SME Suit podcast, brought to you, of course, by Rakbank Business. My name's Richard. I'm a journalist based in Dubai. I'm the host of the podcast, and today we are talking about brand power, and who better to talk about brand power with than the Senior Vice President and Country Business Manager for the UAE and Oman for Mastercard, Gina Peterson. Gina, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also with me today, happy to ask questions, Tom Baxendale is here, Head of Digital Business Banking, Rakbank. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. It's good to be back. Thank you.
Good to have you with us. Let's talk about power. Gina, brand power. Mastercard, obviously a powerhouse brand. But how do you define brand power?
Look, at the end of the day, building brand power is about having a very strong and easy to understand message about what it is that your entity is trying to achieve. So if you're a small business or if you're a super brand, customers need to understand what it is that you stand for, right? So it's very clear when you're starting out, as an SME, is to spend a lot of time defining that and refining that, so that ultimately, you can communicate directly with your audience, make them clearly understand what it is that you're trying to offer them, what differentiates you. Customers want to be able to truly understand that, and for me, that the power is in being very clear around what it is that you stand for.
So how do we apply that to small businesses? Because people are going to be watching this and thinking that's great if you're Mastercard, but you are literally a household name around the world, and there's only a handful of brands that you could say that about. You've run a small business. How do you marry those two worlds?
Yeah, and I think the principles remain the same. Whether you're a large global brand that is a household name, you have to continue to reinvest and reinforce what it is that you stand for at every single opportunity, right? So whether it's your customer experience or whether it's the way you look, it's the way you present your brand into the channels that we're operating in a very digital world now, right? So all of the channels that represent your brand need to speak to your brand principles. So whether you're Mastercard or you're a cookie shop down the road, or previously I ran a branding agency, we spent a lot of time making sure that every person within the organization was able to clearly articulate what that brand stands for across all of those channels. So for me, that consistency is critical, and that's what then ultimately allows you to acquire more customers, because they can clearly understand, okay, this is a brand that I want to deal with. This is why this brand is differentiated, and ultimately, this is why I'm going to be loyal to this brand moving forward as well too. So I think with small businesses, sometimes you get founders who may be experts in a particular field. Maybe they're a finance guy or a tech guy. So they have the desire and the appetite to create this great entity, but then often either fail to invest in marketing. So they see it as a function that maybe is quite easy to do, but actually you need to invest in working with agency partners, professionals who can help you take your brand forward. I think in a lot of instances, people underestimate actually what goes into creating the broad brand narrative, the look and feel of your organization. I think sometimes a brand might underinvest in a logo design that doesn't serve them for the future of their business's aspirations, and then they either allow many people within the organization to sort of take the brand in different directions. And as soon as you have that lack of consistency, then all of a sudden you have a market that doesn't understand what you do. So that confusion then doesn't allow you to exceed, doesn't allow you to attract new customers, doesn't allow you to make them more loyal, doesn't allow them to help refer you to others as well too. So it's very important to focus on those pillars of consistency, and really investing in those as a baseline, in the same way that you would best invest in having a good accountant, having the right office space, and so on and so forth.
So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I think we touched on a lot of elements, right? But I think if I'm a small business and I understand what my business does, I think a lot of businesses struggle to project that externally.
Yeah.
So I can train my staff and say, this is what we stand for. I can make my products sufficient and project them out into the market. what mechanisms or elements do I need to focus on, or what tools do I need to use in order to project that brand image?
Yeah, I mean, look, and I think the great thing is about the era that we're in now is that there are so many tools available, and a lot of those tools are free too. If you are very good at, operating your LinkedIn channel or your Instagram channels, depending on, the audiences that you want to reach, you can build those baseline communities yourself. As long as you go back to those principles kind of consistency and ensuring that your story remains true to your brand promise. And then you then have to continue to ensure that whether it be internal channels, so the staff who work in your team are clearly able to articulate that. So that's also about practice, right? I remember when I launched my previous marketing agency, it took us probably 10 or 15 interactions or pitch presentations before we truly nailed our story, right? So it's about practicing on your friends, practicing on potential investors as well. I think a lot of people go into investor presentations and they haven't nailed what their brand story is. So they've got a great idea, but they haven't nailed and put enough emphasis on the value of the brand story within that and the reflection of that. In the same way, when you want to present yourself, you spend time on, your hair, your outfit, your makeup, etc. When you're managing your brand, that is the visual, in often situations, representation of who you are as a corporation. So it needs to reflect that. And then the things that you do, right? So more and more, it's very important that you understand who your target market is and what motivates and drives that target market. I think a lot of people forget to do the research, right? So if you've got a good idea and you think it resonates with a target segment, you need to assess any kind of flaws. And I think sometimes people get protective of their ideas as well too. I've got this great idea, I'm going to launch it, and don't take the time to maybe do some customer research and validation in that process. And then even, test and learn. When you start to use, digital communications channels, put some, different messaging in the market to test what resonates and what is, more effective than others. The value of digital marketing and those sorts of tools allow us that ability to be quite reactive. And when you are starting out, you do have that flexibility to iterate. From a Mastercard perspective, we're quite, firm on our, kind of brand narrative and our global marketing teams really make sure that we all stay very consistent to that. So when you're starting out, you do have a bit of flexibility, but as I said before, you need to also be careful not to, try to go in too many directions as well too.
So it's funny you say that. So a lot of companies that come particularly to Rakbank to pitch for technology, all that kind of stuff, one of the things that doesn't go very far is if you focus too much on either technology or trying to prove that your technology will fix a particular thing without doing that broader research. Yeah. So when we're assessing companies that we particularly deal with, we want to see the whole package, right? And brand is also a very important part of that too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people often think that, I could do it myself. I know a guy who can, design me a logo, or I can do that for you cheaper. And I think a lot of people underinvest in that or think that they can just, do it themselves. And as it's it's at the end of the day, marketing is not brain surgery. So you can technically, in some instances do it yourself, but are you doing it the justice that it needs? And is it going to go the distance in terms of your business aspirations? So in the same way that you sit down and do your 5-year business plan, it's okay, what's my 5-year marketing plan? Am I using PR properly? And PR is, I think, an underrepresented channel sometimes within people's marketing mix. They obviously, want to issue a press release, but don't maybe spend the time to stand back and think, hey, is this newsworthy? Or, what would, make a publication want to represent what it is that I'm saying? So how have I made this relevant to my end user or end consumer? So I think it's taking that time, which doesn't always happen. And I sometimes think marketing can be left if it's not your core capability. I mean, I was very fortunate that we were a brand and communications agency, so we had those core capabilities in our wheelhouse. For me, the challenge was finances, right? So I had to become our CFO, and so for me that was the reach. And I think what's nice in the way we as Mastercard are seeing SME banking and some of the solutions that we work on with partners like Rakbank as well is how do we empower SMEs with the right solutions that can help them cover the gap. So they don't need to be experts in marketing, or they don't necessarily need to be experts in invoice management and so on and so forth. So we bring in fintech partners to close some of those gaps so they can focus on running their business, right?
Yeah.
Focus on getting paid. So that's where I guess our focus is how do we help make that journey easier, whether it be on the marketing and sales side. We have solutions that allow retailers to help build retail e-commerce sales sites and that sort of thing. So these are types of things that if you're a new business owner, you may not necessarily, you may feel a little bit lost. So our focus is on trying to take away some of that hardship and make the journey much easier for SMEs.
So Gina, what's the playbook then for a small business with limited resources? 2 or 3 hacks you can give them in terms of marketing and branding, building a powerful brand. I don't know, I'm looking around the room, I'm thinking if you're the guy who's selling pots like this or those lovely plants behind you, fairly generic products. Most businesses have a fairly generic product or service. What's the playbook?
Yeah, I think the start point is you have to, when you've gone into any business, is you have to feel like you have a point of differentiation, right? So that is having an honest conversation with yourself, with your business partners, to truly be able to, in a few words, articulate what is your point of difference and what makes you unique. And I think once you have that, it's very easy to build around, right? Because then you can build your, creative tools. So, leverage the power of, digital channels, which for the most part are free, at least to get started. And then leverage your network. One thing that, amazed me when I first became a founder was that people really want to see you succeed. So use your network to amplify, but equip them with the tools, right? So you need to write to your friends and give them, this is who we are. This is our logo. Here's a nice image of what our business does. So it makes it easy for people to promote you to their network. So I think, the power of the network, leveraging the power of your network is important. Focus on finding, I guess, what resonates with your key segment. So if your product or solution is focused on the youth, then really tap into, okay, research states that the youth is really focused on kind of the future and looking at sustainable solutions. So lean into that when you're building your communication. Ensure that it speaks to that, so that the communications that you're creating anchor your brand in what it is that your audience stands for as well too. And again, not all of it has to cost a fortune. I would also say work with other small businesses as well too. Small businesses have often been in your shoes, so are more likely to be perhaps a bit more flexible on pricing. You might be able to also do a quid pro quo on services. I know when we were building our agency, that was something that we did a lot of, because the small business community is what kind of is kind of a very vital part of the ecosystem. The other thing is tap into all of the government and kind of industry resources, particularly in a market like the UAE, where there is so much focus on SMEs. Looking ahead, to 2030, with the vision of 1 million SMEs by 2030, which I'm sure will hit easily, is because of that. There's a lot of kind of whether it be through Dubai Chambers or any of the kind of supporting entities to try to unlock funding. If you're a female entrepreneur, there's a lot of kind of different entities available for you to be able to pitch your concept to and get some support from a funding standpoint. So there's some of the key things that I would say were things that I wish I'd known when I maybe went into it myself. Each business is very unique though, right? So
definitely. And when you talk about network effects and ecosystems and speaking to different kinds of companies that maybe are in the same domain, what's your advice to small businesses when looking at social media? Because obviously these are the largest digital platforms that we have, things like Instagram, things like Facebook Marketplace. A lot of small businesses start there and try to grow their business.
Yep. So look, as much as the channels are free, I would always say make sure you reserve some investment, one, for creating content that represents your corporate brand. So I have seen some founders go down the route of either being too personal, so they treat the kind of the Instagram or LinkedIn channel a little bit like they would there, because it's not a domain they've been playing in before. So that impacts credibility, because all of a sudden you might have built, you might have a great product, but if you're telling your story in a way that maybe the creative feels a little bit low budget, or you've used an image that you haven't necessarily paid for the rights. So there's a lot of places you can go wrong. So I think investing, setting aside some budget to make sure you have some support to deliver that at the right level. There's also a lot of great AI tools and free tools even available to help in that process. And then I think, look, the great thing about social media is it does allow you that ability to connect more closely with consumers. So, but again, it's really linking back to making sure that every execution that you deliver on a digital channel, that it remains consistent to the brand story. So you have to have those pillars that you continue to link back to, so that a customer who comes and looks at your whether it be your website, your digital channels, etc., can take away that that consistent meaning. So it's very important to retain that consistency.
And do you see a trend, or is it easy if you're using a platform like Instagram, for example, to slip into I am the brand? You see a lot of that coming through with small businesses.
Yeah,
because Beyonce is a brand, Taylor Swift is a brand, but a starting company, and you're trying to get yourself out there. You're trying to be, emphatic or daring in some of your content. Is it easy to slip into that trap?
Yeah, and I think, look, it goes back to, and obviously every business is unique, right? So, if you're, a startup fashion brand, the rules might be different. If you're a, kind of a SME solution provider who looks at, kind of invoicing, right? So what I need from those brands is very different. So their ability to, kind of move on the spectrum of maybe creativity or pushing, being a bit more out there, is different. So I think, it's about being authentic. It's also about having a message. I think, if you're just over promoting your brand without linking it back to, well, why am I posting? What is the story I have to tell? Am I launching something? Am I telling the story of why my product is differentiated? I also have always advised, no matter which industry I was working in, always leverage research as much as you can, in that, whether it be media outlets are more likely to pick up your story if you include, some interesting facts and figures that relate to your industry. So make yourself relevant and useful, and, avoid kind of posting for the sake of posting without any real story to tell.
A quick word on trust and building it. Again, Mastercard, small businesses listen to this and go, well, of course we trust Mastercard. But if you're a small business, how do you build that trust? A quick word on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, building trust, again, speaks to authenticity. So authenticity and consistency, if you continue to reiterate your story, then that ultimately, kind of builds layer upon layer, and then that comes over time. It's hard. It's not something really that you can do instantaneously. So if you are trying to build your business quickly, then, you need to be very focused on the channels that you use in an integrated way to be able to, kind of very quickly get your message out there across channels. So again, I always truly believe in the power of integrated marketing. So leverage media, leverage digital, leverage events, get some good influencers. I think if you're trying to build rapidly, borrow somebody else's brand. That always helps. And look, we have a program called Start Path where, we invest in an up-and-coming new businesses around the world, and those brands, by virtue of us investing in them, automatically have a leg up because if Mastercard's investing in them, they must be great, right? So I think leveraging the power of others' brands can also really help in building that trust quickly from the outset.
And I think a really powerful part of building a brand is also the storytelling element. We all know the story of McDonald's. We all know the story of Facebook. In fact, that has many very different stories as it's grown larger. Where do you rate the importance of storytelling in building a brand?
Oh yeah, well, the only way you can create emotional connection is with storytelling, right? And I look at, Mastercard has one of the most powerful storytelling platforms in the world, which is Priceless. Priceless is, can mean so many things across across the world in which we live in. And we use that as an anchor to be able to connect with consumers. So, and just because you're a corporation doesn't mean you don't have a story to tell, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what will resonate with people. They want the story of your products. They want the story of you as well too. I mean, founders have a unique dynamic in that they are the brand, right? So people are invested in that, but that also means it's equally important to project your personal brand in the right way at all times as well too.
Can I ask a specific question about women-owned brands and minority-led brands? thoughts and advice for them, and also what Mastercard is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's amazing to see the amount of, kind of female entrepreneurs who are coming into the ecosystem. Mastercard is committed at an overall level to bring 50 million micro and small and medium enterprises into the digital ecosystem by 2025, and I'm pleased to say that we have already done that. And a large proportion of that, the reason we're able to hit that is because we're seeing a larger contribution of female entrepreneurs entering that space, whether it be in a market like Pakistan, where we've introduced a product called Farm Pass, which is really more about driving financial inclusion, bringing people into the digital economy who weren't there previously. So we are able, I think, to provide all of those tools that through financial inclusion, through financial literacy, the ultimate output then is kind of empowerment through financial success, which is something that we're obviously committed to globally. We obviously I think for female entrepreneurs who are, kind of looking for, funding or looking for support in growing their businesses, the nice thing about being in the UAE is that, there's a number of venture fund and venture capital organizations who have purely focused on supporting the female economy. I also found, as a founder myself, that the support that you get from the network as from other female entrepreneurs is invaluable and really helps in supporting the growth of other businesses. So I think it's absolutely a focus area, and we will not achieve any of the targets, whether it be at a UAE or at a global level, without doubling down on the importance of female entrepreneurs and what they bring to the economy.
So say I've achieved all that as a small business. I know what my business is for. It's resonating in the market. I'm using the appropriate channels. How do I measure that success and ensure that my brand is growing in my community?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're lucky when you're a global brand, because there's lots of, global resource search houses who, kind of evaluate our brands on a kind of day-to-day basis. So it's, very clear for us where we stand amongst, kind of the world's global brands. So I think, it goes back to, we talked about measurement a little bit earlier, is that, the wonderful thing about digital channels is that you have that ability to see how your brand is resonating. Yep. So, if you're pushing out digital content, truly pay attention, and through Google Analytics, through kind of a number of tools which are very easy to access, whether you're from a marketing background or not, pay attention to the data, and then learn from that. The data doesn't lie, so pivot, and what I've always been amazed is, and I've taken many customers on this journey, is that your ability to, once you start to adapt and refine, you really see that success, and that success on the marketing side then translates to more sales, more loyalty, more opportunities to increase your revenue depending on your business model. So I think it's using the tools available for you to measure and track that success is very important. I mean, it can be harder, I think, when you're a smaller brand, because you don't necessarily have the global reach. But then, then obviously that constant investment is critical. So you cannot stand still and say, yep, okay, we've launched our brand, we've arrived. It's, then continuing to reinvest in that and leveraging the power of research. Again, also, looking, I always, speak to the power of the network, because people will always give you feedback as well too. We have a lot of SMEs who come to us. Some of them are our fintech partners. Some of them are, kind of customers of our customers as well too. And they often ask for feedback, right? When you ask for feedback, people will genuinely help you in shaping the next direction of your brand.
Just before we wrap up, the future of marketing, what's next? I know Roger Manner, who's the CMO of Mastercard. I'm sure you know him well. I mean, he's written a book, Quantum Marketing. It was a New York Times bestseller. What's the future of branding? What's the future of marketing? If we try and look around the corner, what's next? What do you see?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question, in that yesterday I was just having this discussion on another panel, particularly in the context of banking, because there is a risk in the future that as we become more seamless in the way we interact with brands, particularly on the financial services side, is customers often are looking for more invisibility. So eventually, there are some, whether it be banks or even, technology partners, that we are enablers. And so it's very important for us to ensure that our brands remain relevant, because we don't want to lose that in the context of becoming more seamless. So I think there's a big focus for us on how do we make sure that we continue to bring that brand value more on the kind of experiences and human connection side, through the products and services that we deliver, and the stories, back to the storytelling piece that align to those. But then we have to look at, of course, all of the new technologies. So whether it be voice search, whether it be AI solutions. I mean, AI is changing the way we do marketing. If I look at the conversations we have now, it's not so much about one-to-many. So a lot of customers will come to us, oh, I want to be on a billboard on Shakeside Road, so then everybody knows that my product is there. Actually, for a small business, you don't actually need that. You might think you need that because it'll make you sleep better at night, that, oh yes, my brand's everywhere. But actually, you have the power to do one-to-one marketing through, whether we have a solution called Dynamic Yield, which is very much about AI-based one-to-one marketing that allows, whether you, Richard, visit a site or I visit a site, for me to have very tailored communication, which is driven based on my unique needs. So I think those who lean into that hyper-personalization are going to be very successful in the long run, because they are able to have a one-to-one conversation with their potential customers. They can find out why they're dropping off, how successful their brand campaigns have been, so on and so forth. So I think leveraging the power of technology in the road ahead will be critical to success, and it also makes you more efficient, right? It means you're not wasting your money on the wrong kind of marketing investments. We also have a tool that we've been rolling out in the US recently, which is more about finding the right and ideal media mix, right? A lot of customers say, hey, I've got $1 million to spend, I don't know where to spend it, right? If
Good
you
problem to have.
Yeah, it's true, yeah. Not all SMEs have $1 million, but imagine you only have $100,000 to spend, which also I know is a lot for an SME, but if you only have $100,000 to spend, I want to have the confidence that, okay, maybe actually, and maybe, it's easy to go to the some of the, kind of more well-known websites, but actually, maybe there's some very focused, targeted sites or reference points, etc., that, that may offer greater value for your media spend. So leveraging those technologies are going to make us more efficient and more able to connect directly with our end consumers.
Gina, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Richard.
The thoughts there of Gina Peterson, Senior Vice President, Country Business Manager for the UAE and Oman at Mastercard. Appreciate your time. Tom, also good to have you with us today.
Thank you very much.
Tom Baxendale, Head of Digital Business Banking at Rakbank. That is it for the latest episode of the SME Soup podcast, brought to you by Rakbank Business. See you for the next one.